Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Audiobooks collection. We are continuing our read of Men Around the Messenger by Khalid, which we downloaded from AllahsWord.com. Let's read. Page 60. Muadh ibn Jabal, may Allah be pleased with him, the most learned of halal and haram. Among the 70-man delegation of the Ansar, who took the oath of allegiance to the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the second allegiance of Aqaba, sat a young man with a bright face, graceful eyes, and a radiant smile. When he was silent, he attracted attention with his profound peacefulness and devoutness. On the other hand, when he talked, he held his people spellbound. This man was Muadh ibn Jabal, may Allah be pleased with him. He belonged to the Ansar, and he was among the foremost believers who gave the second oath of allegiance to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Naturally, a man of such precedence, faith, and certainty would not miss for the world a battle or an expedition. His uppermost quality was his knowledge of fiqh, jurisprudence, the practical aspect of Muhammad, peace be upon him's message. He reached the apex in knowledge and fiqh, to the extent that made the Prophet, peace be upon him, say, "The most learned man of my nation in halal and haram is Muadh ibn Jabal." He resembled Umar ibn al-Khattab in his enlightenment, courage, and intelligence. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent him to Yemen, he asked him, "How will you give a judgment or settle a dispute?" Muadh answered, "I will refer to the Quran." The Prophet, peace be upon him, then asked, "What will you do if you do not find the decree you are looking for in the Quran?" Muadh answered, "I will refer to the Prophet, peace be upon him, Sunnah." The Prophet, peace be upon him, asked, "But what will you do if you do not find a decree, even in the Sunnah?" Muadh readily answered, "I will be judge between mankind by resorting to juristic reasoning, ijtihad, to the best of my power." Now, Muadh's staunch commitment to Allah's book and the Prophet, peace be upon him, Sunnah, does not mean that he closed his mind to the countless and endless hidden and equivocal facts that await someone to unravel and adjudicate. Perhaps both Muadh's ability in juristic reasoning and the courageous use of his intelligence enabled him to master the fiqh, excelling all other scholars. The Prophet, peace be upon him, justifiably described Muadh as the most learned man of my nation in halal and haram. History portrays him as a man of remarkably enlightened, resolute, and decisive mind. For instance, Aizzallah ibn Abdullah narrated that one day he entered the mosque with the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, at the dawn of Umar's caliphate. Then he sat among more than 30 men. Let us hear him narrate the story. "I sat with a group of more than 30 men. They were recalling a hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In this ring sat a dark, swarthy young man who had a sweet voice and a radiant face. Whenever they disputed about a hidden or ambiguous meaning in the hadith, they at once sought his legal instruction or judgment. He seldom, if ever, spoke unless he was asked. When their meeting was over, I approached him and asked him, 'Who are you, O Allah's slave?' He answered, 'I am Muadh ibn Jabal.' So I instantly felt close to him." Also, Shahr ibn Hushab said, "When Muadh ibn Jabal was present when the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, were holding a meeting, they looked at him with reverence." Umar ibn al-Khattab, the commander of the faithful, often consulted him. It seemed that Muadh had a highly disciplined mind and a captivating and convincing logic that moved peacefully and knowledgeably. When we look at his historical background, we will always see him at the centre of attention. He always sat there surrounded by people. He always maintained a discreet silence that was only broken whenever people were anxious to hear his judgment and whenever they were in dispute. When he spoke, he looked, as one of his contemporaries described, as if light and pearls were emanating from his mouth, rather than speech. He reached his high rank in knowledge and reverence when the Prophet, peace be upon him, was alive, and maintained it after his death, notwithstanding his youth, for Muadh died during Umar's caliphate at the age of 33 years. Muadh was generous, magnanimous, well-mannered, and good-natured. If anyone asked him for money, he would readily and gladly give it to him. His generosity made him spend all his money on charity and aid. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, died, Muadh was still in Yemen, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, had sent him with the task of teaching Muslims their religion and fiqh. When Muadh returned from Yemen during Abu Bakr's caliphate, Umar ibn al-Khattab was informed that Muadh had become wealthy, and he suggested to Abu Bakr that the community should have half of Muadh's wealth. Umar did not waste much time as he rushed to Muadh's house and told him about what he and Abu Bakr had agreed on. Muadh was an honest and trustworthy man. The fact that he made a fortune did not make him vulnerable to suspicion or sin. Therefore, he turned down Umar's suggestion and refuted his viewpoint. Finally, Umar left him. The next day, Muadh hurried towards Umar's house, and no sooner had he laid his eyes on him than he hugged him. His eyes flowed as he said, "Last night I saw in my dream that I was crossing deep water. I nearly drowned were it not for your help, Umar." Afterwards, they both went to Abu Bakr's presence, where Muadh asked him to take half of his money. But Abu Bakr said, "No, I will take nothing from you." Umar glanced at Muadh and said, "Now it is halal and blessed." First, the pious Abu Bakr would not take from Muadh 1 penny unless he was absolutely positive that he had earned it in a lawful halal way. Second, Umar was not trying to accuse or cast suspicion on Muadh. In the final analysis, this epitomizes the era of ideals which was filled with people who were in perpetual competition to climb their way up to the apex of perfection allowed to human beings. Thus, some of them soared up to the sky with their good deeds. Some were foremost and the rest followed a middle course. Yet, all of them were travellers on a caravan of goodness. After a while, Muadh emigrated to Syria, where he lived among its people and the expatriates as a teacher and scholar of fiqh. When Abu Ubaidah, the governor of Syria and a close friend of Muadh, died, the commander of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab, assigned Muadh to take his place as a ruler. Only a few months had elapsed after his taking over when he died, humble and repentant to Allah. Umar used to say, "If I were to grant Muadh ibn Jabal succession and Allah asked me, 'Why did you make him your successor?' I would have readily answered, 'I heard your Prophet, peace be upon him, say that when those who have knowledge stand before Almighty Allah, Muadh will be among them.'" The succession that Umar meant here was not merely over a country or a governorship, but over all of the Muslim lands. When Umar was asked before his death, "If you choose your successor now, we will give him our allegiance," he answered, "If Muadh ibn Jabal were alive and I made him my successor to the caliphate, then I died and met Allah, who asked me, 'Whom did you assign to rule Muhammad's nation, peace be upon him?' I would answer, 'I assigned Muadh ibn Jabal to rule it after I heard the Prophet, peace be upon him, say, Muadh ibn Jabal is the imam of those who have knowledge of Judgment Day.'" The Prophet, peace be upon him, said one day, "O Muadh, by Allah, I love you dearly, so do not forget to recite after every prayer, 'Allah, help me in remembering you, in offering thanks to you, and in worshipping you properly.'" Indeed, the Prophet, peace be upon him, supplicated Allah to help him to remember him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, persevered in stressing this great fact that tells people that authority belongs to Allah. He has the power over all, and there is no power or any might except with His permission, for He is the most high and the most great. Definitely, Muadh had learnt and fully grasped this fact. He did his utmost to cherish and apply this fundamental basis in his life from that moment onwards. One day, the Prophet, peace be upon him, ran into him, so he asked him, "How are you this morning, Muadh?" He answered, "This morning I woke up as a true believer." The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Every truth has its manifestations. So what are the manifestations of your belief?" Muadh readily answered, "I have never woken up without believing that I might die before nightfall. I have never slept without believing that I might die before the morning. And I have never taken a step without believing that I might die before taking the next. It always seems to me that I can see each nation humbled to its knees and each nation called to its record of deeds. It always seemed to me that I can see the dwellers of paradise wherein are delights everlasting, and the dwellers of hell wherein they are in disgracing torment." The Prophet, peace be upon him, commented, "Now you know, so stick to the truth as long as you live." Indeed, Muadh had submitted himself and his destiny to Allah, for Allah was all that mattered to him. It was just that Ibn Masud described him as an ummah, a leader having all the good and righteous qualities, obedient to Allah and haniifan, who worshipped none but Allah. We used to liken him to Ibraahiim, Abraham, peace be upon him. Muadh advocated knowledge and the remembrance of Allah. Moreover, he invited mankind to seek the useful and true knowledge, saying, "I warn you against the deviation of wise men. You will know the truth when you see it, for it has a distinctive light." He believed that worship was an end and a means to reach justice. One day, a Muslim asked him, "Teach me." Muadh asked him, "Will you obey me if I teach you?" The man answered, "I will not disobey you in anything." He said then, "Fast, then break your fast. Pray during the night, but you must get some sleep. Earn what is halal and what is rightfully yours, and do not earn sin. Die as a true Muslim. Finally, I warn you against the supplication of those who have been wronged or oppressed." He believed that education meant knowledge and practice. Therefore, he said, "Learn whatever you like to learn, yet Allah will not make your learning worthwhile unless you practice what you have learned." He believed that belief and remembrance of Allah meant the perpetual calling to mind of His greatness and the perpetual calling of oneself to account for deeds before Allah does so. Al-Aswad ibn Hilal reported, "As we were walking with Muadh one day, he said, 'Let us sit down for a while to meditate on Allah.' Perhaps the reason behind his discreet silence was his unremitting meditation and contemplation. Likewise, his once telling the Prophet, peace be upon him, that he never took a step without believing that he might die before taking the next was due to his engrossment in the remembrance of Allah and in calling himself to account for his deeds. At the end, death summoned Muadh. It was time to meet Allah. When the stupor of death creeps upon someone, his subconscious takes the reins and spurs the tongue, if it is able to disclose the reality of all mankind in concise words that summarize his life story. In those blessed moments, Muadh ibn Jabal faintly uttered great words that revealed a great believer, for he gazed up into the sky and humbly supplicated Allah, the Merciful, saying, "Allah, I used to fear you, but now I implore you. Allah, you know that I did not devote my life to travel in the lands or to earn money or property, but rather consecrated it to knowledge, faith, and obedience, notwithstanding intense heat or hardships." He stretched his hands as if he were shaking death and went into a coma. His last words were, "O death, welcome. You are a long-awaited beloved." At last, Muadh ascended to Allah's paradise. Subhanallah, that was the story of Muadh ibn Jabal. May Allah be pleased with him. Jazakallah khair for listening. Hope your day is full of goodness. Assalamu alaikum.